this train, and I'm going to try to come back to joy. So it's probably good that we're sitting next to each other. We can be killjoy and joy, the final pair with each other at the end of this. You can take this as kind of a report from the hinterland. So there's a sort of zoological effect that you can have in watching me, Utah now, speak to you about these issues. I guess I want to begin by saying that since I'm in Utah, I'm all about seduction. I see myself as part of a team of seducers who are saying to Utah students over and over, come over here. You won't believe how much you want to know our ideas. How much you're going to beg us to make you uncomfortable. You'll want us to be difficult. You'll want us to be moving, surprising, provocative, uncompromising. You'll flat out be intrigued by how things intersect, which we're just beginning to put together, and requiring us to come from many angles of approach. So we end up saying, true, we're luxurious in our ideas. We're going to call ourselves a strict luxury product through and through. But can you afford to pass up this luxury? And I think that's really the sense that I was saying. I completely get your sense about necessity, but I think that's the argument that we can't win, at least from the standpoint of Utah. And you're right, many of these things may not necessarily lead directly to jobs, but they lead to life, which is much more important in the larger sense. And I can tell you, I went to the University of Utah, strangely sentenced myself to Salt Lake City, grew up on the East Coast, did all my schooling on the East Coast, and then I had this sort of intriguing opportunity to go to Utah. And I remember I actually called NYU to tell them I was not going to accept the job at NYU, I was going to go to the University of Utah instead. There was a silence. And then John Maynard, who was very sweet, just blurted out, what's a lesbian feminist going to do in Utah? And I said, that's what I'm going to have to find out. I said, I think I'm going to go be a missionary to the missionaries. And I think Laura can attest to this. It really does feel like saving souls every day. There are many shades of whiteness in my land, I'm here to say. I'm a whiteness expert, but increasing numbers of students of color, and something that may surprise you, we are the largest concentration of Pacific Islanders in the entire United States is in Salt Lake City, for reasons you can suspect. But people who come to be Mormon do not necessarily stay to be Mormon, and other family members come. So I mean, Salt Lake is becoming a very interesting place in that way. And therefore, I'm not afraid to say that we deal in luxury. And that's what we peddle. And can you really be without luxury in your life? I think that's actually what we're learning in the economy right now. They're saying that luxury products are coming back because people can't live without their luxuries. And that was, of course, one of Oscar Wilde's great lines. Necessity is luxury. So at any rate, that is to say, at Utah, in the Gender Studies program, we take as a model a line from Roland Barthes that we've stolen and tweaked. Are there any scientists in the audience? Okay, good. And the line that goes like this: some are scientific because they lack subtlety. And so what we can think about is that we are the purveyors of the subtle. And I don't think this means that we leave out being crass. So Sarita, we still got crass going on. But I think the crass and the subtle go together. And Rod called this creativity, and Sarita called this deep listening and unfathomable expenditure, and Inderpal called it wild thinking, and Laura Briggs thinks we can make ourselves invaluable. And I think that's just the point. We totally are. Right? Why would we ever undersell that? We can be more interesting than anybody else. Our ideas are more compelling than anybody else's ideas. That is what we trade in. We trade in ideas. And I'm not at all underselling. It sounds like I'm sort of foregoing the idea of structure, and I'm not. So let me come back to that and say that everything we do and everything we build structurally must work to showcase our ideas. Because when we're on an even point of view, some of us are on an evil point of view, we beat out everybody every time. In every public forum, right? When you are side by side with somebody just trading the same old ideas, it is easy to blow them out of the water. Now, is it easy to blow minds in Utah? Yes, it is. I'm going to be frank on that that point is why I flat out love that job. You can blow a mind every day without trying. It is the sort of place that when you're walking down the street, you know, if I just see a person of color and they see me, we go like, hey. Just anywhere, at a gas station, pretty much anywhere, there's a sense that we're in this together. Now, that's been my goal as Director of Gender Studies. I have been in this job for 11 years. 11 years. And that's sort of how long it's taken to rebuild the structures of this program. And what I want to say is that each and every structure we've put into place has always been about how to make our ideas work more seductively. That's really how I took on the job, and to build structures that will allow us to test the ideas, and then importantly, to materialize those ideas. You'll laugh about this also as director. Every agenda that I make for every meeting of gender studies, I write in the form of a modernist poem, so as not to lose that sense of creativity. And I really would like to think about what would it mean to see the administrator as seducer, in a good sense, all right? What might that look like? So yes, I know, that could also look very bad. So that's why I say I have to sort of frame this, trust me on this run, all right? Please trust me. So as you know, the three examples I tried to give in my paper are really about structures and dynamics that would serve ideas. So I want to you read about the faculty seminar on gender. I just want to say a word about that because I think it will frame a larger question that we'll probably want to get to in our conversation hour. It was important to me to put together something that would allow people to come together and think together across all of our boundaries. And the more I thought about it, that's something we rarely get to do in our academic lives, and we're sort of getting to do it right now. But to do it at the University of Utah meant to say, we're going to come up with a topic, and I put this in for Laura Briggs. One of our topics was race, money, and adoption. And this is why we so desperately need her book. Thank God it's coming. And we thought, what would it mean to come together as scholars all over the map and have a seminar on race, money, and adoption? About 80 professors in the university came by invitation to this. We represented 20 different disciplines and academic units and had a wild conversation based in part on the documentary Daughter from Dang. And then the conversation sort of went everywhere you could imagine. And we just realized we don't ever do that. We go and we hear presentations, there are Q&As, there are panels, but to really think together and to commit to do that 4 times a year and get excited when the next one is coming and what's the topic going to be and who's got the topic and what's the film going to be was enormously important. And then we decided to start putting on this show with ethnic studies. So it's sort of 2 programs that were fairly separate, coming together and saying, we're going to do this together and get to know each other intellectually before we know anything about each other's curriculum and everything else. And the sort of intellectual thinking together then got us very excited, like, so what, all right, let me come and let's start having meetings. As we started having meetings together to look at the curricula, how the majors are structured, and to think about creating a bridge, we thought, what's the most insane bridge we could create between gender studies and ethnic studies at the University of Utah? And that was LGBT concentration. The very place that had historically been the problem for these 2 programs, we decided to create a structural bridge between them. And that's what we're busy doing at this moment. And decided that we weren't going to pull back from the really difficult questions, that we were going to come together and sort of talk about the things that have pulled us apart, whether queer theory is a white person sport, you know, what is the status of global studies in relationship to U.S. racial formations? Is one getting subsumed? Is one getting ignored? And what we found out is through the faculty seminar on gender, we got connected very fast. So talk about fast. This was actually a circumstance where we came together very quickly, and it cost no money whatsoever. That was the beauty of it. This cost not a thing except the food that we put out on the table. And I can tell you that at least for gender studies, it transformed everything. It was the beginning of the total transformation of the program, where the program became very, very visible in the university very quickly, whereas it had been this sort of little scholarly island. Let me just make 2 other sort of quick points. From there, we decided to tackle a structural problem, which was cross-listing, which I'm sure you have as a big nightmare at your institution as well. And my point there was, let's make departments profoundly desire us. All right, so inverting that thing. Let's make them say, oh my God, we want and need gender studies. And of course, we did that by hitting their accounts with SCH, which was to say we became these SCH machines, and then could have this sort of pattern of ostentatious, generosity, where we would give all the SCH without even being asked right back to the department. And their heads just spun around, like, you know, somebody giving us something when they don't need to do that. And they began coming to gender studies and wanting to cross lists and wanting to have intellectual connection with us. And so that's been working very well. And I think they were sort of asking, why are you so attractive over there to your students? What is it that you're teaching that makes students want to go to you? And if I had only known Laura Kang's answer, I would have said controlling processes and implicit practices. But I didn't yet have that answer. We did joke around about having courses called Sexy Fun Course 1, Sexy Fun Course 2. I think Inderpal and I had that conversation at one point in time that was interesting. Then, to defend ourselves against the very departments that we wanted to desire us, we started teaching students about disciplinarity. And so we created this course that at first was a joke, and now it's just totally serious. So they're called disciplinary cell courses. We stopped just short of calling them disciplinary jail courses. But they're meant to sort of really understand the boundaries of how a discipline works and how something like gender studies, race, class, sexuality gets done inside a discipline, all the cramping that goes on because of the discipline, the possibilities because of the discipline, and it's really a way to teach the debate. You are teaching something about the structure of the university in those courses, and they have to take 2 different ones, so they get 2 different takes and 2 different disciplines. And that's been very interesting, I think, as a way to move forward. And my third dynamic, which is where I'm going to end, is something that I half humorously called in the paper dazzling estrangement. The phrase, of course, comes from Juna Barnes' Nightwood. It refers to the members of the Berlin Circus who decide in that particular context that they're seen as so freakish that they have to come up with a way to dazzle their own estrangement. And living in Utah, one does need that every day. So the point was, how are we going to go about that? And that brings us back to seduction. I felt like as gender studies faculty, we needed to go out and sort of make ourselves available to lecture in all these different units. And so I just reported in the paper about my most recent experience of speaking first to Grand Rounds Gynecology and then to the Department of Pediatrics. And what was really interesting to me, because I thought I would go and then they'd try to swamp me with a bunch of scientific stuff, they were so amazed by the ideas that are going on in our world. Their heads nearly came off their bodies, and that's not easy to do with these sort of medical researchers, because it was practicing gynecologists and researchers and so forth. And immediately they want to start signing me up for their national conferences, and I will now keynote their statewide conference to all the pediatricians in the state and child psychiatrists. Speaking about queer childhood and racialization and sexualization of children in a global frame. And so that just brought me back to the fact that the ideas that I'm trading in are the ideas that you trade in, but maybe we just have undersold ourselves in terms of this fabulous luxury and the joy that we can bring to it. So with my 1 minute left, I would just sort of refer you to my notions from Babette's Feast that was referred to earlier. And what I really want to get back to is this idea, because I think it takes us back to teaching. What we are trying to do is to pack sensations around signification, right? And at one point it really depressed me to think I hear my students sort of talking the same terms coming out of the course as when we went into it. But that wonderful scene of Babette's Feast where the Christians basically just take the pact that they will not speak about the glories of the French dinner they're being served. The hallelujah at the beginning, to my mind, probably bears no resemblance to the meaning of the hallelujah at the end, right, which literally then means mind-blowing caviar. And that's really what we're doing in our teaching. Don't ever forget that, because the sensations that we've packed around that are life-changing. So that's my thought.